Just to kick off them, so my name is Lance Clarke, and I'm VP Commercialization and Strategy with our Clean Technology. I'll walk through what the company's about and where we see nuclear going from a global and Canadian perspective in a couple of minutes. I guess first, just a little bit about me. I'm a 30-plus year energy guy from Newfoundland. Spent first half of my career in oil and gas, so worked with what was Petro-Canada. Left them right before the Suncor, they say merger, but we all know it was a takeover, so that's fine. So I've worked offshore in Newfoundland, all the major projects. Worked on some projects in Alberta, Fort Hill, so I was a part of the initial startup team with that project. Then I moved out into more the utility side of things, hydro, just getting electrons on the grid. And I got into some cogeneration work. And about 4 years ago, ARC reached out to me through some contacts and said, "Hey, you want to test out the nuclear industry?" I was a bit apprehensive at first, and we'll walk through because I know what a lot of the beliefs and thoughts people have around nuclear. But as I did some research, I said, "Okay, I got to go do this," and I couldn't understand why it's not already done, to be quite honest. So that's a little bit about me and the sort of history that led me to the company and what we're doing. So I'll walk through a few slides just to give a bit of context around the company and around the nuclear opportunity that we're all facing, and hopefully folks can get some education out of it. I'm going to assume that people have relatively limited knowledge. So if you already know it all and come across as being condescending, my apologies. Not what I'm trying to do. So first of all, a little bit about ARC. So we're a clean tech company. We're developing what we call the ARC 100 Advanced SMR, and I'll touch a bit more later as to what the advanced part means. And our unit size, the base size is 100 megawatts. That's the ARC 100 name. Our technology benefits from decades of R&D work, previous investment in that starts back with the DOE in the US. This is a proven technology, and I'll touch on that. So it goes back as far back as the 60s, to be quite honest, and the base technology is very similar to what you would see in some of these nuclear submarines, what powers them. So this is all proven tech. We're in the US as a head office, but we moved into Canada several years ago, and mainly driven by the acceptance, to be quite honest, for newer technology. And we've got an ambitious launch customer in the Brunswick Power, and we're moving very stringently towards the west, and I'll touch on that a little bit. So it gives us a bit of a first mover advantage from a Generation 4 SMR perspective. And again, I'll touch on the differences in the generations. We have a very high focus on industrial decarbonization, AI data centers, and of course, putting electrons on the grid. And I'll explain how we fit so well to all these things as we go through. So that's just a little bit about us. So in general, and everyone may already have a good feel for this, but we get asked a lot, why nuclear? Well, obviously, nuclear is getting a lot of growing support rapidly from a global perspective. An expanding market is going through a bit of a renaissance. There's a whole suite of reasons for that. A lot of it's driven by energy demand, the desire for climate change, those sorts of things. But the advancement of the technology is what's really made it more receptive, and people see it as a great opportunity because it satisfies those first couple of needs, but the technology advancement is really bringing it mainstream and meaning that it's going to be able to be deployed on a much bigger scale. So obviously, it's low carbon electricity. For us, it's very high temperature, and I will touch on that in a bit, which helps for industrial decarb. It's a stable, reliable baseload power, so it's not intermittent like your wind and your solar. They have a role, don't get me wrong, but we can come in and provide that baseload stable energy that's needed. Specifically from an Alberta perspective, we are aligned with the Alberta Look Forward policy and their innovation goals. And again, I'll talk about that in a little bit. And the newer technologies like ARCs offer faster, more cost-effective deployment than some of the older technologies. They have a place as well, but we're coming at this from a very different approach, which brings opportunity for economic development, job creation, and that. Um, so a little bit about, I guess, the history of nuclear power development uh, to give some context. So this goes back to the 50s where nuclear was first started to be used for energy generation. You know, obviously post World War II, everyone had come up with this technology that was used for other purposes that none of us want or like. However, they said, let's start using this for some more positive areas. And the different generations started to evolve from the 50s right up through to where we are today. And a lot of what you hear about today is actually generation 3 and 3 plus. So it's really an advancement of those original water-based, water-cooled technologies with things getting tweaked, made more efficient, made safer as they evolve. And the generation 3 plus is really where we hear about a lot of the water-cooled SMRs that are coming in. So what's happening right now with OPG in Ontario with the GE deployment, that is a water-based technology. So it's based off of all the stuff that's been used through the last 50, 70 years. And some of the newer units that we're hearing about in technologies, companies like NewScale, they're water-based. So they're generation 3 plus. Where ARC sits and where a lot of the newer technologies come in is in generation 4. And the differentiator is we're not water cooled. That brings a huge opportunity for a vast array of safety improvements, plus a lot of higher temperature relays and a whole suite of other benefits, which I'll touch on shortly. Within that generation 4, there's a whole different suite of different cooling technologies, and they all have different degrees of development in terms of how evolved they are. So some of them, you will hear people talk about SMRs, and they'll say things like, "Oh, it's not proven." That's incorrect. There are certain types of SMRs that aren't proven yet. They're still in the development stage. And usually it refers back to how they're cooled. So there's everything from lead cooled, gas cooled, and there's a whole series of different methods. Where ARC sits is we are a sodium cooled reactor. That technology is proven. And it goes back to, as I said, some of the original nuclear submarines and how they work. They're typically sodium cooled reactors that are in those submarines. Our specific technology actually goes back to the 60s. And there was a reactor called the EBR-2 that was done in the US, and it ran until 1994. And our whole technology is based off of that. So there was public data made available. We took it. The guys who actually worked in that reactor came over to ARC. Most of them have long since retired, but they came over and they evolved this into something that was going to be able to be commercialized. So this is a proven technology that that we don't have to have some of the, I'll call it the more myth concerns about. This is just a screenshot of what an arc reactor facility would look like. So if you think about, your traditional reactors and, the Simpsons and the big stacks, that's not what we are. Give some context on size. You can see the cars in the background, but a slide that we find gives greater context is this one. So on the left is an arc reactor on the site with the fenced off safety area. On the right is an overhead shot of the Costco in St. John, New Brunswick. So this gives you an idea of the size of what we're talking about. The actual building area is actually about half the size of a typical box store. And the safety area, so the safety zone, is actually about the size of the parking lot. Whereas a traditional safety zone with traditional water-based reactors, which are under pressure, which ours is not, obviously because of the different coolant, A traditional safety zone can be kilometers and kilometers and kilometers. And even beyond that, there's all sorts of other safety processes required. So for ARC, with that sodium coolant, we don't have to have those same concerns. So if there was an issue, which the probability is infinitesimal, to be honest, compared to even traditional reactors, which are safe, if you're standing outside of that parking lot, you're fine because you don't have the pressure to disperse any radioactivity. So it's a very different animal that we're dealing with. So I've already touched on a couple of things, but just to give a base outlay of some design features of the ARC reactor. As I said, our base unit's about 100 megawatts. We can go up to 200 megawatts. We can stack these, obviously not on top of each other, but horizontally. And we can, so therefore we can, with a relatively small footprint, as you saw, we can put 400 or 500 megawatts in a location if that's what was required. Our lifespan for design is about 60 years for one of these facilities. With a small refurb, we easily see how this could go to 80 to 100 years. The capacity factor, which is what drives the economics on one of these, you look at compared to wind, solar, which is down into 20% range. Obviously, it's intermittent for reasons we're all aware of. Well, a nuclear reactor can run very efficiently once it's fired up. So we can run at about 95% over that lifespan, which starts to really make you be dependable, and it also helps the economics considerably. We have a metallic fuel, and that's a little different than traditional reactors, which typically had an oxide fuel. And what that does for us, when combined with our cooling, is it enables us to be, the term that the industry uses is inherently safe. So what it means is that through physics, it becomes, and I'm oversimplifying, but I'm not a tech guy and I like to do that. It works, everyone understands it better. And what it means is that our fuel is not able to get at a temperature high enough to boil off our coolant. So if you think about the traditional reactors, their fuel is able to boil off that water, problem. For us, it can't happen. The metallic fuel will hit its peak as hot as it can get. The sodium will not boil because the temperature has to go much higher for that to occur. And then what happens is the metallic fuel reaction starts to wear itself out and it slowly goes down. So it automatically, through physics, will shut itself off. And this is proven through that EBR-2 reactor. And there's actually some YouTube videos online where they show where they actually did this. Force the reactor into failure, watch it turn itself off through physics. So very different animal. Makes it much simpler to build. Because of that, we're able to go to modular designs. We're able to simplify all the supporting systems around it. We don't need safety systems on top of safety systems on top of safety systems. So it really makes these things much simpler. The other big advantage is with this metallic fuel in this system, we can have a 20-year refueling cycle. So traditional reactors, it varies, but they're anywhere from a few short months to a couple of years that they have to be constantly recycling their fuel through. And what it means is it creates a lot of maintenance issues. It creates a lot of fuel handling and more waste. Ours is much simpler. Put it in, run it, leave it. After 20 years, you pull it out. The analogy I use is traditional reactors, if they were burning a log, you'd put the log in and it would burn off the bark and the log itself becomes the waste. For these reactors, we put the log in, we burn the log, and we remove the bark. That's the analogy I like to try to put through so people can get a feeling about how much more efficient these newer reactors are. So I've touched on this obviously already, the safety features, because the reactor will shut itself off through the law of physics, and it just automatically transitions to a safe state without operator intervention. So all of that said, looking at where nuclear is going from a broad perspective and thinking about technologies like ARC's technology, you know, how can it be used differently? What does this really mean for us? So if you look to the right-hand side of this chart and look at the power applications, traditional reactors really can only do that very top part on the right-hand side, base load power. Okay, so you build bigger reactors because they're very complicated, and you need the efficiencies of large size in order to be able to make it economic. And they have to be turned on, and they have to be kept on, because they have to continuously be able to pull the heat away so you don't have those boil over operational challenges. So what it means is they can't really support in an efficient manner things like renewables. They can't ramp up and ramp down. Our technology, you can actually ramp it up and ramp it down if you want. Within an hour, it can go from 100 megawatts to about 20. So if you really wanted to follow solar, follow wind, you can do it. Our units as well can fit into small grids. Right? You get one of the biggest challenges in a large country, you think about Canada, is transmission. So we can go into areas that have transmission challenges, and we can supply 100, 200, 300 megawatts. In developing countries, it's usually advantageous. Can't put a 600 megawatt reactor in most developing country locations because they don't have the transmission to support it. For ARC, we can go into those places and we can put a reactor in a central location and you don't have the transmission issues. So it gives us big advantages. As well, on that power side, we can support AI new demands by going in behind the fence. So we can go in, especially for hyperscalers, and we can give them 100 megawatts in a very controlled manner with limited connection and disruption to or from the grid. So those are advantages on the, I'll call it the electron side. Then a huge area where traditional reactors simply don't have the same advantages that we do is on the provision of heat. Because we're sodium cooled, we're not at that 300-degree type temperature that would max out for a water-based reactor. We can go up to over 500 degrees, and a lot of the other SMR technologies can as well. So we can provide industrial heat to folks for whatever purposes they want, chemical work, clean fuels. We've done a lot of work looking at the oil sands and how we can help SAGD through heat provision, mining operations, desalination. This is an area where the generation 4 advanced SMRs can do things that traditional reactors can't do. One of the other advantages for ARC specifically is that we have the ability to provide medical isotopes en masse while we're operating. So traditional reactors can't all do medical isotopes for a bunch of reasons. Excuse me, I'm not even going to pretend to understand, but advanced reactors, some of them can provide isotopes. Ours is one of those. And a select few of those can do it in real time, i.e. you don't have to turn the reactor off to remove the medical isotope. We're one of those. So we know we're going to be able to not just provide clean energy and provide heat, we're going to be able to save lives. And again, proven technology. So just a couple key milestones for ARC in Canada. Came into Canada in 2016. Company's been around just about 10 years before that. And we started a partnership with New Brunswick Power, who are only one of 3 nuclear operators in the country, in 2018. Since then, we've been working through the Canadian regulatory review of our technology, of which there are 2 phases, plus I'll call it an optional third. Last month, we got our approval on phase 2, and we don't need to do the third optional one. So this was a 6-year venture, big undertaking. We got through it. We're extremely excited about it. And it means we will not have to go through that again. It's not like a project regulatory process where you have to do it for every project. We're one and done. So this is a great sort of confirmation for us from a global perspective that the technology is able to be licensed. And the Canadian regulatory system is one of the most renowned in the world. You know, us, the US, and the UK as sort of the top systems that are recognized. So that's led us through this process with NB Power. They've put in for their environmental assessment application about a year and a half ago, and they started the project licensing process for nuclear as well about a year and a half ago. So we're well into the process with them. So a little bit about where we think all of this is going to go. From a Canadian and a U.S. perspective, some of the data coming out of the associations, show massive low growth demands, a massive opportunity where nuclear is one of the few sources that can support this with a clean energy. It's going to take all of us. There's no question. There's going to have to be, oil, and there's going to have to be gas. There's going to have to be wind, solar, and nuclear, every bit of it. And as I said earlier when I introduced myself, I've spanned most of those actually in my career. So we're going to need it all. The amount that they're talking about and the number of new SMRs they're talking about by 2050, quite frankly, can't be done. It's not going to happen. There's, from a practical perspective, as a project guy, you just can't get there. But if you don't start, you'll never get there. So we're at that point where we have to get moving, and as things evolve, we'll definitely start chipping into the need. So it's a great opportunity for all of us in the sector. Tying into that market, of course, we see over the last year or so the heavy demand for AI and the energy consumption tied to that. I think some of the numbers that are out there are probably, again, a bit unrealistic. I don't know if they can actually be done. But what's clear is the demand is going to be there, and we're going to have to try to feed it. And things like intermittent energy sources aren't going to do it. They need baseload power, and there's a high demand there for clean energy, clean power. We've started already signing on with MOUs and partnerships with some developers in the sector. There's one group here called Deep Atomic. We recently signed up with. They're out of Europe and South Africa, and they're deploying on the eastern seaboard of the U.S. So we're actually in the middle of site searches with them right now. And there's a whole suite of different entities out there who are looking to do this. We all, of course, hear about the Amazons and the Googles and the Metas and everything they're doing. And we've had interactions there. They're all testing the waters as well. Where we really see the market is going to take off is actually with these developers, because most of these data center companies, they're not interested in owning the energy source. That's not what they want to do, right? They want to buy the energy so that they can process their data. They don't want to become nuclear companies. So this is where these developers come in, and that's a big focus we put on it. So swinging that then into an Alberta context really quickly, we see some great advancement from an Alberta perspective. In 2021, Alberta joined the interprovincial MOU with New Brunswick, Ontario, and Saskatchewan. We've had a lot of interaction from the industrial decarbonization perspective in Alberta through the work the Pathways Alliance has been doing. Plus, we've had a lot of discussion, interaction with individual oil companies as well, looking at how we could integrate, especially with things like heat provision for SAGD. And of course, there's the standard clean grid. Everyone's trying to move off of coal over time, and that's going to require some good baseload options. Of course, Alberta has lots of gas you can use. At the same time, I think there is a place for nuclear in the middle of that as well. And we see the timing of our discussion here is good, because we see in the last couple of days where the Premier has announced an open discussion, we'll call it, an open interaction with the public around nuclear and nuclear opportunities in Alberta. So we see this as a great growth area for us. Tying to that specifically, in the last few months, ARC has signed an MOU with a developer in Alberta, Nucleon. We're quite excited about it. They've been around for a couple of years. We've had different interactions. These guys definitely understand the sector. They understand the opportunity. And so we've signed up with them. They are looking at Alberta, plus they're looking at some work in southern U.S. and Texas and that. But we've agreed with them we're going to start with and focus on Alberta. They've picked 3 specific sites that they think are the prime ones. They are the ones who have been doing the interactions with the communities and the municipalities and First Nations. We're just starting to come into some of that with them. They're looking at Peace River and really Bonneville area are the primary 2. The goal here is that with them, we'll select the site here. So we were hoping sometime here in Q3 before we get into the back end of the year. Fingers crossed. And we'll start on the formal engagement process, I guess, with them and the actual environmental assessment applications and that at the back end of the year. Those are the current goals. We're very excited about it, very impressed by the team Nucleon has put in place. And we're looking forward to actually getting out there on the ground with these guys in the province and having some of the conversations and helping spread the word about the fact that nuclear is not what it used to be, and it's an opportunity for all of us. And let's see where we can take it. So that was really the main slides that I wanted to present. So pop myself out of the presentation here and see if anyone has any questions.
Awesome, Lance. Thank you so much. Great presentation. And I saw the announcement from our from Premier Smith and the team. So looking forward to learning more from them too. I'm pro nuclear, obviously, and which is why we brought you on. I'm delighted that you were able to do this. Is there any questions from our guests? No, I think we're good. That was a very good presentation. I love it. Awesome.
Well, spread the word. Any questions that you guys get back when you post this on, feel free to reach out to us. And we're here, and you're going to be hearing more about us. And we're excited to be coming into your neck of the woods.
Look forward to it, and we'll welcome you with open arms. Thank you, Lance.
All right, good stuff. Thanks a lot, guys.
Take care. Bye-bye.
Bye.